Mining Minute. I'm your host, Teresa Longo. Thanks for joining us in Season 2. I'm here with KWG Resources CEO, Frank Smink. Hi, Frank.
Hello.
Frank, I'm still answering some viewer questions. So this one came to me last week. KWG Resources has a meeting coming up soon. What's going to happen during that meeting? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. It's what's called a special meeting of shareholders. We are asking the shareholders to vote in favor of an amendment to the company's constitution, principally to provide for provide the board of directors of the company on behalf of the shareholders to have the authority to issue preferred shares in series of various types. That's to provide us with the flexibility to use the preferred share concept to raise the capital for acquisitions and to pay for development. The market now is, as everyone knows, we're living at a time of historically low interest rates, and we have an opportunity to buy some producing assets which have income, and with that income we can pay a high dividend, and so a preferred share is a very useful instrument to do that, and that's what we're asking the shareholders to enable us to do.
For you is about the recent results at the Coleraine Minerals Research Lab. What can you tell me about the progress happening there?
Actually, not very much in terms of the detail, but maybe the big picture overview would be helpful. Coleraine is a very specialized part of the University of Minnesota, and it's one place in the world where they have one of everything. We discovered that and went there to use those facilities and some of those lab pieces, in this case reactors, to do a series of tests to see if we can, in that process, determine which is going to be the best kind of reactor, and very simply that's the furnace, to use our method, which is by combining the chromite mineral, carbon, and an accelerant, and this is where the secret ingredient is, and then triggering a series of processes which result in chrome metal turning itself into metal, becoming metallized at a much lower temperature than is the case with present methods which use big zaps of electricity. So that's the overview of what these tests are doing. Perhaps you can interview our Vice President, Moe Levine, who is much more intimate with the detail of these things.
So, Frank, I get a lot of interesting feedback and a lot of interest in the Mining Minute due to your ability to think outside the box.
Really?
I do. So tell me a little more about what's on your mind now.
Well, we talked about Turkey. That's certainly going to occupy a big part of my mind here. The other things that have happened in the recent past, and I'm not so sure they were any insight of mine, but they came visiting, if you will. The Hyperloop is something that we participated in with a couple of young engineers who had identified the Canada Chrome Corporation claims, the so-called railroad right-of-way, as a place that the whole idea of a Hyperloop might be tested with virtually no cost of assembling the place to build it, because we've already done that by staking the mining claims and assessing them for purposes of building a railroad. That's just a fascinating technology. You know, Elon Musk is really changing the world with his Tesla car. Now he's invented a battery that you can hang in your garage, on your garage wall, which will be charged by the shingles that he's invented, which look like the nicest slate shingles you could ever buy, and make an entire family in the way it lives energy self-sufficient. So, you know, with a mind like that, you have to pay attention to other things that he comes up with, and he's decided that the vacuum tube that the department stores used to use to send their invoices upstairs and the change back downstairs may be the way of the future. Much better, more efficient, safer, much faster than a highway to transport things. And in that context, we could building a tube, putting a tube that is big enough to carry, say, 5 to 10 million tons a year of chromite from the Ring of Fire down south in a pod that rides on air in a tube that's largely devoid of atmosphere, that then lays on top of a series of pylons. That could be a very cost-effective way of, and a very environmentally effective way of moving the chromite from where it is in the middle of nowhere to where we want it to turn it into ferrochrome. So that's exciting. We're told recently that of the more than 2,600 proposals submitted in a competition for Hyperloop investment by Hyperloop One, which is the leading company, the owners of the Elon Musk technology. We were told that we were amongst 30 finalists in our collaboration with these two young engineers who made the application.
I want to ask you, what do you think about these mining minutes and how everything's rolling along?
They're very enjoyable to do. I kind of wish Donald and Melania would perhaps team up to do them. I think that might be more entertaining than his tweets. And I think that these mining minutes perform the same function. We're distributing little bits of information in a watchable format. One thing I did notice is that the people who watch them regularly were anxious to see them start again. So you're developing a following. I'd like to see them somewhat a little more commercial, so that they're more rewarding for you. You put a lot of time and effort into this, do a nice job editing them. And as you have mentioned to me, if there's other people that you're following, our following, would like to hear from, perhaps they can let us know.
Okay, so you just had a trip to Turkey. Tell me about that.
Well, I can't tell you very much.
Okay.
I can tell you, yes, I was there, and it's a marvelously civilized country, cradle of civilization, really, which we all forget. It's also a very important place in the world of chrome. A lot of the chromite that has been mined since chrome became an important commodity in modern times has come from Turkey. They mine a low-grade chromite there. They make ferrochrome. It was a nationalized company that made ferrochrome in the past. It's now privatized for the last many years. By a well-known entrepreneur. We were there to educate ourselves a little bit at the invitation of a producer who had come to visit with us at the PDAC, Prospectors and Developers Association convention in March of 2015. Really serendipitously, the chief scientist of the CanMet mining laboratories of the Natural Resources Canada facility in Ottawa, the former mining branch, is a Turkish national. This man was born and schooled in Turkey. He's a PhD scientist in chrome and is doing fundamental research to help the Canadian government understand the economic opportunity from basics represented by the discovery of this huge and high-grade chromite in the Ring of Fire. So Dr. Paktunk was able to accompany us in this visit. We in the back of our minds, and we've been in touch with the President's office, the government of Turkey. They are very active in pursuing foreign investment as a nation, and so through that contact, we're in the early stages of exploring what we might do for Turkey that produces a fair fair volume of chromite concentrate. It's a known commodity in the world, in China in particular, the Turkish concentrates. There is an opportunity for them to use our natural gas reduction process to upgrade the concentrate into the higher value product of ferrochrome. And that's of great interest in Turkey. And that may spell an opportunity for the government of Turkey to invest in commercializing this process. And
recently, you testified before Parliament's Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Do you have any updates for me on that front?
We, following that testimony that day, we communicated further. We had a meeting following the session with a number of members of the committee, the chairman of the committee, the chairman of the Northern Caucus of Parliament, or of the government, and the parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Natural Resources. And the three of them were very interested and very enthusiastic about what they might do, act upon to assist moving things forward, particularly on behalf of the First Nations. So I explained to them that I would love to have the opportunity to inform them and educate them on a couple of important things that they might do, very, very meaningful things, small but meaningful things that they might do for the First Nations, and things that I was aware of. These are what I call legacy issues, and they always involve money, and something as simple as you have a community lose half a dozen or more youngsters to suicide, in a population of a few hundred people. This is just devastating, and it's a medical emergency. But the cost of looking after those tragedies for that chief and council are not easily compensated as a medical emergency, although they are. So that's just one shining example of how these communities then deal with their social challenges and go into a financial deficit and end up with their backs to the wall. And that's the kind of thing that this committee, the Parliamentary Standing Committee, could lobby with their peers in the government and help address, so that that kind of nonsense doesn't continue to exist. That they're so busy dealing with emergencies that they really have no time to deal with the Ring of Fire, and that's so. I guess first we have to put out the fires that are burning them
With
up.
all the developments in U.S. politics, how might Donald Trump's presidency affect the dealings with the Ring of Fire?
I think the overall view is that it's going to be good, in that he's pledged to create employment, bring capital back from offshore. Big focus of how to do that and how to employ that money is investing in infrastructure. And that infrastructure is going to consume metals, and amongst those metals is stainless steel. So I think it'll be a shot in the arm for building and mining in North America.
Thanks for joining us during Season 2. I'm joined here this week by a very special guest, Mr. Tim Peterson, President of Global First Power Limited. Welcome, Tim.
Nice to be here, Teresa. Thank you.
And thanks for being here. Mr. Peterson, Global First Power Limited has an answer to the high cost of polluting diesel generator electricity that happens in Canada's north. Can you tell me about that?
We are very fortunate to have a patented new nuclear fuel that doesn't emit any radiation and is designed to fit in a small nuclear reactor, generally described as a VSMR, a very small nuclear reactor. We call it a micro-modular reactor. In smaller sizes, that is perfectly adaptable to communities and mines in the north that are off-grid. And we can cut their costs by, for the mines, a minimum of 25%, and for the communities up to 70% from what they're currently paying for diesel-generated power. Besides a reduction in costs, we also are reducing the amount of CO2 emitted and helping with climate change.
This is fantastic news for Canada's North and an excellent opportunity as well.
We've had a wonderful uptake of it because of the environmental effect it has, but we're also ensuring that we're working very closely with the Inuit and First Nations people to not only be our operators, security guards, but to we are welcoming them to have ownership in not only the production of the electricity, but the distribution of the electricity and the heat generated, and some of the businesses that we think can be spawned from that, such as greenhouses, animal shelters, and fish farms.
This is outstanding news, Mr. Peterson. President of Global First Power Limited, Mr. Tim Peterson. Mr. Peterson joins us again this week. Thanks for being here again.
Great to return. Thank you.
My question last week was about your answer to the high cost of polluting diesel electricity in Canada's north. So what would it cost approximately to give power to a community of around 10,000 people, Mr. Peterson? And then my second part of the question is, are there running costs that are associated with this type of power?
Well, Teresa, nobody wants to buy a nuclear reactor and operate it because they don't have the expertise and they're nervous about it. So we're not selling the nuclear reactor, we're selling the electricity, and we take the risk of all the operating costs, and we give them a fixed rate that lasts for 20 years. This has tremendous benefits to the mines because they can fix their operating costs. Electricity is anywhere between 15 to 30% of the operating costs of a mine, and we can fix that cost for 20 years. And the same thing with the communities. So they have much more predictable costs. And with this reduction in the cost to them of anywhere from 25 for the mines and 70% for the communities, they can use more electricity for things like e-health and e-education, which are sorely lacking in these really remote communities.
So here's the thing, you mentioned to me before that at this point in time in Northern Canada, some people are even avoiding using things like the internet because that could use a lot of power. So in order to conserve their power, they're not even accessing the internet at times. Is that true?
We have been told by people in Ottawa, the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of the Department of Natural Resources, that their electricity costs are about $1.50 per kilowatt. That makes it extremely expensive to even run a computer and to stay on the internet. And all of us take that for granted in the South here, but up there it's a luxury. So to upgrade both their lifestyles and their information, reduced costs of electricity will have tremendous benefits to the community.
And for the country of Canada as well, Mr. Peterson.
Absolutely, and thank you for saying that.
Ask you about an update on the FSDI feasibility study. Can you talk to me about that?
Sure. As promised, China Rail First Survey and Design Institute group did complete the feasibility study on time before the end of December. We'll be speaking to that in a press release that includes information on that and a whole host of other things that are current. Now the next step is to use that with the appropriate banks in China who are interested in looking at the possibility of lending us the money to build that railroad, or in collaboration with China Rail. And we're planning to visit in China to that end, probably in the first quarter, so that would be into March. We haven't had an opportunity to review the feasibility study. It's still in China. One of the things that we need to do is pay for it. They're not going to share too much of the information in it with us until we pay the agreed fee. So in the next raise, sometime in the next many weeks, one of the use of proceeds will be to deliver the installment payment that is due, and then we'll go and review the results. We're also hoping to, we've extended an invitation to the chiefs of Webequie and Martin Falls First Nations to accompany us on these meetings to China to visit with the banks, and that's an ongoing conversation at present.
Firestarter is screening at KWG Resources offices this week in Toronto. You have one more day to go to KWG Resources offices, 141 Adelaide Street, West Toronto, to see a preview of Firestarter. In this week's episode, I talked to Firestarter Director Jamie Bailey. I'm asking Jamie Bailey what got cut out of the film. The film went from 1 hour and 30 minutes to 47 minutes.
The documentary down from an hour and a half to 47 minutes, mainly because we are hoping to sell this as an hour of television on a Canadian broadcaster, and something like this would be better off as like an hour worth of television, which is about 44 to 47 minutes. That was one of the main reasons to do it. Secondary reason, it's a very complicated story. And the process of making this documentary, I was trying to tell too much, essentially. And what I was hoping to do by trimming it down and restructuring how the story flow worked was just to make it more concise and to make it clear. Sometimes, or almost every time, less is more. So that's ultimately the reason why we cut it down.
Make sure to go to KWG Resources this week to see a preview of Firestarter, directed by Jamie Bailey.